What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Monday, April 10th, 2017, start of a brand new week of utter insanity, courtesy of the United States government, the nicest government money can buy. Unfortunately, it's not our money. Entangled here. All right, we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, but I'm going to ask you, don't call in unless you really have something to contribute. Don't just call on in just to hear yourself on the radio here, because we do have a lot of material to get through. Mike is in our control room, dealing with our technical issues, feeding the mutant hamster, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, let's get the media distraction out of the way right here at the top. There's been a shooting at an elementary school out in San Bernardino. 2 adults are dead. 2 children are wounded. They're not saying exactly what, but they're saying it was a murder-suicide. First question that pops into my mind is, was the shooter on prescription antidepressants? Because they do seem to be a factor in a lot of this otherwise inexplicable behavior here. So let's talk about the aftermath of Trump's cruise missile attack on Syria. Condemnation continues to pour in from around the world. Over in France, an editorial in one of their papers was headlined, "Trump has just made his first major international mistake," and basically saying, yes, it is shocking to see those pictures of the dead babies. That's why they manufactured them, for the shock value, so that you'll react without thinking. But that's a bad, bad quality in a president, if in fact Trump actually believes Assad did carry out that gas attack. And they're chastising people like Merkel and Hollande, who are like fully on board. Oh, yes, we've got to do this. We've got to go whoop on Syria. We have our opportunity now to achieve our geopolitical ends over there. But Donald Trump has to be realizing that he has made a major, major blunder that could cost him the 2020 election. Story out of the original antiwar.com. Trump's base revolts against the Syria strike. I know it certainly ended any favorable feelings I had about the guy. Another article was out there saying that the U.S. just bombed its own reputation in Syria. It's bombed its own trust. Everybody sees the United States now as a mad dog, telling lies to start a war and then carrying through on them. Now, Trump has now issued a demand to Russia to stop supporting Syria. That's going to go over like a lead balloon. Putin will not back down. So, the corporate media is fully on board the war agenda. Even Fox News is out there saying, oh yes, we've got to do this. It's time to do this. It's a full court press to sell you the next war. Plural. I'll get into that in a little bit. The Washington Post is urging aggression and regime change in Syria. They keep changing the story back and forth. 5 years ago, it was regime change. Assad is gassing his own people. And then that fell apart when it turned out it was the rebels who were gassing the people. Then the U.S. said, well, we're not really in Syria to bomb Assad and the Syrian people. We're there to get ISIS and al-Qaeda. They just kept missing ISIS and al-Qaeda and continuing to bomb Syrian infrastructure. Well, that one didn't fool anybody, so now they're back to saying, yeah, you got us. We're out there to replace the government in Syria, the one who will work with us. And they're just out there saying, oh, this is a great thing. This is a great thing. So I have a plan. I think we need to grab everybody out there who says we should have a war with Russia, give them guns and parachutes, and drop them on Moscow, while those of us who do not want war with Russia get to stay home. All in favor, say aye. Boy, I heard that all the way out here from the mainland. I don't know about you. I'm really kind of sick and tired. And we saw this back in Vietnam. You know, kids who are not necessarily in favor of the war get sent over to make the war, while the people who wanted the war, who profited from the war, stayed safely at home, counting their stock portfolios here. Now, the story about whether or not the U.S. Warned Russia prior to the attack on the Syrian airfield has been flipping back and forth. And what it turns out, according to White House spokesman Sean Spicer, there was no warning sent to Russia through political channels. There was a heads-up that was sent directly from the U.S. military to the Russian military. And it wasn't much of an advance notice out of concern that Russia would tell the Syrians, duck. All right, let's grab a quick phone call. Steve in Massachusetts, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I want to talk to you about Syria.
Yes.
You kind of blew my theory right out of the water, but I'm going to present it anyway. In the past, Trump has getting on Obama for being soft on his foreign policy, and I think he was set up to make him do some kind of action where they created a false flag, and he was put in a spot where he had to react. And my theory is maybe he bombed Syria but gave Russia like a little nudge, nudge, wink, wink, saying, hey, I'm going to, send some missiles to Syria. It's, no real damage is going to happen. I got to get these people off my back. Maybe we'll just go on from there.
Well, I think, first of all, the fact that Sean Spicer is saying no message was sent, contrary to the earlier report, I think the other fact is cost-benefit analysis. I mean, the damage that has been done to America's reputation and trustworthiness around the world is epic in scale. Everybody now sees the U.S. as this rogue nation that concocts fairy tales about other countries and then uses them to justify wars of aggression. This is a major foreign policy fail. And yes, the neocons and the war hawks are out there saying Donald Trump is our boy now. The story I am getting is that the congressional leadership went to Donald Trump after the false flag gas attack and simply said the war agenda is moving forward with or without you. And if you don't order this cruise missile attack, then we've got enough votes to get you removed from office for whatever reason they were going to concoct. Because that is the only thing that makes any sense unless we concede or stipulate that Donald Trump really was dumb enough to fall for this false flag stunt, knowing that false flags are a reality of geopolitical life. They have been all along, and certainly the U.S. has their own record of them. But I think when you consider what a botch-up job the actual attack was, the U.S. sent a message of unpredictability, of lying to start wars, and once again demonstrated our weaponry isn't very good, because 37 of those 59 cruise missiles, they originally fired 60. One of them didn't get past, the rail of the ship and went into the ocean. But out of 59 missiles that were fired into Syria, 37 of them did not hit that air base. They're known to have hit at least 3 other villages, killing civilians, including children. And that the blowback from that completely undermines Trump's assumption of the moral high ground here.
Yeah, I mean, are weapons really that bad? I mean, with the GPS and laser pointed the missile systems. I mean, how can we miss so badly? That's what made me go into my theory. Is maybe it was done on purpose. So look at.
Well,
Trump right now, he's got all the media off his back.
Hang on. Okay. If the epic failure of these Tomahawks had occurred in a vacuum, I would say, yeah, there's something questionable there. But we're hearing these horror stories about the F-35, the F-22, the Gerald R. Ford, the Independence-class littoral combat ships, the Freedom-class littoral combat ships. Apparently, the latest generation of amphibious assault ships are being built without a well deck, which means they can't take along hovercraft and landing craft with them. And there's just a pattern of complete incompetency in terms of our military-industrial complex. They've gotten back into the habit of building weapons that cost a huge amount of money but don't perform very well because the hope is they'll never actually have to be used. They're just, built to put on display and, rattle our sabers with and everything. Anyway, listen, Steve, going to let you go because I got a lot of stuff I need to get back to. And
thanks, Mike.
Okay, and we're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates just rejoining the network. We're talking about this cruise missile attack on Syria, based on an obvious false flag. The story simply does not make any sense at all. Assad was on the verge of winning his war against the U.S.-backed rebels. They were starting peace talks to end the war. A little over a week ago, Trump and Tillerson were saying it was okay with them if Assad stayed on, if he won the next election. And then you get McCain out there saying, and all of a sudden there's a gas attack, which accomplishes nothing militarily, especially because it was directed against civilians. It's designed to be a shocking, horrific crime, so that you'll look at the pictures and react with your emotions instead of actually thinking if the story makes sense. Because it never did. And following on the principle of if at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again, they're piling the lies up even higher. The U.S. is going to accuse Russia of complicity in this Syrian chemical attack. Tillerson is saying Moscow clearly failed in its responsibility to eliminate Assad's arsenal. Just before we went to air on Fox News, they're running the story that Russia knew that Syria was going to do this in advance, and they did nothing to stop it. I mean, they're just grasping at straws, anything that they can get traction on. Now they're claiming that Assad is using white phosphorus. No support for any of it, just absolute fantasy. They're trying to throw so much out there that people will say, well, there's a lot of smoke. I guess maybe there's some fire. No, there isn't. There's a lot of smoke. And apparently Rex Tillerson is saying when he meets with Putin, he's going to confront them with evidence that Russia knew that Syria was going to carry out this sarin attack and wanted to cover it up. So now they're getting ready to say that anybody doubting the official story is working as an arm of Russian propaganda. I've already got the coffee cup made up from that Washington Post thing. Now, as it turns out, Putin is not going to meet Tillerson in Russia. And the reason is they're not sure who's really calling the shots over here, because you've got Trump saying one thing, Tillerson saying another. Tillerson's gone back to saying that if Assad wins his election, he can stay on as president, and the attack on the Syrian airbase was only in retaliation for the chemical weapon attack. Meanwhile, you've got John McCain out there saying, go back in and bomb them some more. We need more war, more blood. Nikki Haley's up there trying to start wars, not just with Syria, but Iran and Russia. And from Putin's point of view, he does not know, neither do I, who's actually running the show in this country. It's amazing. Scary, actually. So McCain is out there doing his usual unhinged thing. And by the way, I did get a reader letter from Arizona saying he's in office all this time through election fraud. Because this listener says he doesn't know anybody in Arizona who ever votes for John McCain. His votes just appear out of thin air inside those computer machines. So McCain is out there screaming more war in Syria, says Russia is guilty of war crimes. Just out there. McCain is saying the U.S. did not do a thorough enough job in attacking the Syrian airbase and should have cratered the runways. Well, I'm certain the runways were targeted, but remember, 37 of those cruise missiles missed the base entirely. They hit at least 3 nearby towns, killing civilians and children. Now, the Tomahawk land attack missile does have a warhead that is designed to crater runways. It carries 6 hard steel penetrators, and the way it works is if you just blow a crater in the runway, they can fill in the dirt, throw a couple of steel mats over it, and all of the Russian-built military aircraft are rough field capable. They're not damaged by foreign object debris. They can land on dirt roads. They're rough terrain capable. So the proper way to take out a runway is you drive this weapon deep underground, and it blows out a void. And that means you have to excavate down into the void to be able to fill it. You can't just shove in debris at the top and have the runway stay intact. And the Tomahawk land attack missile does have these warheads. And I'm sure that they were probably targeted on the runway. They just simply failed. And by the way, I'm seeing all these news stories in the corporate media about we launched 59 missiles at this Syrian airbase. Nobody's mentioning the fact only 23 of them actually got there. Now, McCain, even though Trump went along with what McCain wanted, an attack on Syria, McCain has turned on him. And he's saying the administration rhetoric about Assad's fate being decided by the Syrian people was to blame for Assad's gassing his own people. McCain isn't even making any sense. Assad getting a nod from the White House that he can remain as Syria's president if he wins the next election is the prime reason Assad would not do anything to provoke a negative response. John McCain must think that you, the American people, are brain-dead morons to even try such a barefaced lie. But that's all he's got to work with. All wars are started with lies, and they're stuck with a lie. Everybody knows it's a lie, so what do? They come back with a bigger and worse lie. They can never admit they were wrong or lying to you. The whole thing's going to start unraveling. So it's come up with a big, Assad has drones filled with Ebola parked in Canada. Assad has a Death Star. Assad tap dances barefoot on his shag carpeting. What an evil man that is. Now, we ran the flashback story where Seymour Hersh had discovered that the Obama administration had sent sarin gas to the rebels to use in order to frame Assad and justify an invasion. And all of this went through Hillary Clinton's State Department. Remember, they had this smuggling line set up from Libya to Syria. And Libyan weapons, including chemical weapons, were being smuggled from Libya to ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria. Technically, given that we've all been told ISIS and Al-Qaeda are our enemies in the war on terror, that constitutes treason. The providing of aid and comfort to enemy in time of war. Now, only a couple of months ago, McCain made a secret trip to Syria, supposedly to meet U.S. military and anti-Assad rebels. Is that when this whole thing was being planned? And by the way, isn't McCain's job actually supposed to be in Arizona? I'm sure the Arizonans are probably happier when he's out of the country here. But you need to remember the long history of lies used to start wars. Remember when the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador went before the UN and said Iraqis were killing babies and stealing the incubators, and it turned out to be a lie. It was a complete fiction created by public relations firm Hill and Knowlton. Saddam's weapons of mass destruction. Only last year, Egyptian police arrested 5 people in Egypt using children to stage fake Aleppo footage. They were manufacturing in Egypt, providing it to all these media sites and saying, oh yes, this is from Aleppo. Look at the horrible, horrible things that are being done in Aleppo. You are getting nothing from the U.S. government and the corporate media but lie after lie after lie after lie. The only things you can trust are the sports scores and the weather report, and they're not all that good on the weather report because they're still screaming global warming, and it happens to be snowing all across Montana at the moment. So I take it back. You can trust them on the sports scores, but that's about all they're good for anymore. You need to turn off that TV news, unless you have an academic interest in what they're lying about today. So, story out of newsantiwar.com, U.S. vows to keep pressure on Syria as hawks urge more attacks, more attacks, more attacks. Lindsey Graham, of course, who never met a war he didn't like, is out there saying that we need 6,000 troops on the ground. And we're going to wipe out ISIS, then we're going to impose regime change. Now, according to independent journalist Mike Chernovich, National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster is trying to get Trump to sign off on a plan that would put 150,000 U.S. troops on the ground in Syria. They're ramping this thing up so fast. They're concerned about the growing backlash, both within the United States and internationally. And they're just going to rush this thing through before anybody can react. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. So we're talking about this report coming out of Chernovich Media, where they're basically saying that current National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster is manipulating the intelligence reports being given to President Donald Trump. Nothing new in that. The Pentagon was doing exactly the same thing to President John F. Kennedy to present a view of what was happening in Vietnam that would lead the president to support what the Pentagon wanted to do. So McMaster is out there lying to the President of the United States and pushing for a plan that will put 150,000 American ground troops in Syria. Meanwhile, McMaster is out there urging Russia to reevaluate their support for Syria. They're rattling the sabers and telling Russia to get out of town. It is not going to happen. And apparently McMaster is now out there saying the U.S. is simultaneously going to fight the terrorists and Assad at the same time. Just sick. Now, a very alarming story. Apparently the U.S. military is building up an armored deployment on the border between Jordan and Syria. And if you look at a map, you'll see that's not all that far from Damascus itself. This includes heavy battle tanks, artillery pieces, and they're building up there. Now, Alex Jones had a report earlier today that a U.S. amphibious landing ship with a Marine detachment on board is on off the coast of Syria near Damascus as well. Maybe they're just going to move fast before anybody can try and stop them. All right, let's take a phone call. George in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, how you doing, Mike? I gotta say it's one thing. I keep hashtagging on Twitter, fire McMaster, because now I know why they wanted to get rid of General Flynn, because I think he fell on his sword for nothing.
I agree.
And the thing is, when that gas attack happened, President Trump should have got on the phone with the Kremlin, and President Trump would have been better off saying, let's let Russia and Assad handle who did it, and we'll just stay out of it. But,
the people who perpetrated the false flag attack, wanted to use it to reverse the U.S. policy on Syria. I mean, you had Trump saying it's just a political reality that Assad is going to stay in power, and McCain went absolutely ballistic and said, no, we must prevail. We will send as many of other people's children and money to Syria as it takes. And that was the whole purpose of the false flag gas attack. And so the people who pulled off that gas attack, they didn't want an investigation. I mean, if you think about it, the cruise missile attack onto that air base destroyed the airplanes that the U.S. claimed were fitted to drop chemical weapons. So the evidence is now gone.
Well, also, too, John McCain, I know Congress is going to be out of session in a couple of weeks. That'd be a perfect time for federal agents to pick up John McCain, interrogate him for violating the Logan Act, going over to Syria and talking with our enemies.
Well, it's a violation of the Logan Act only if he did not have Donald Trump's permission.
And I don't know if he did.
Well, I'd like to know. But this whole situation is spinning out of control. We could literally be at a nuclear war in mere weeks, the way this thing is going. Anyway, George, I'm going to let you go. Coming up on a break here, and getting on back to the news. Now, Bernie Sanders has demanded that President Trump come over to the Congress and explain why he launched an attack against Syria without getting congressional approval. And along with Tulsi Gabbard, is saying that is clearly unconstitutional. The War Powers Act does not cover the president simply attacking another country on a whim. The president can deploy U.S. forces in response to an attack on our country. No Americans were killed in the gas attack. No sovereign U.S. territory was invaded, damaged, or bombed. Now, speaking of Tulsi Gabbard, she is facing calls for her immediate removal from the House of Representatives over her statement that she is not accepting that Assad did the chemical attack without some kind of evidence. And now you have Howard Dean and everybody's up in arms saying she can't be in Congress if she doesn't believe as we tell her to believe. And they're literally mounting a campaign to get her kicked out of Congress. Boy, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We were talking about Hawaii's own Representative Tulsi Gabbard, who has been in the news lately for clearly being a person of her own mind. She refused to go along with that. We're all going to wear white and suffrage or KKK or whatever the symbolism was supposed to be with the other Democratic women during Trump's first address to Congress. She went over to Syria and she met with Assad, and now that's being used against her. We can't have a representative who's actually talked to the dictator. She may have gotten the wrong ideas from him, like the fact that he's not anywhere near as bad as we're all being told. And they're literally ganging up on her. And this is another hallmark of the former Soviet Union just before it collapsed, where the groupthink ruled everybody. And anyone who dared stand up and say, you know, maybe we are leaking a little radioactivity from Chernobyl, they were immediately thrown out. So, Rand Paul is also out there saying, we need to have evidence. We need to have evidence who did this. We were talking about this group of Swedish doctors who looked at the video and said, it doesn't even look like it's sarin gas. So Rand is probably going to find himself under serious attack and calls for him to step down. They don't want anybody in the government who's not fully on board with the conquest of planet Earth. All right, we're going to grab a couple of phone calls. Sherry in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. Listen, I noticed something Friday that I have to say kind of correlates with the idea that the globalists among us may want to financially drain Trump's resources. And they made a big push with this to do this. It's financially drain the Trump, if you will. This is something you said on Friday. You're talking about Starbucks and mixing business and politics. Mm-hmm. And then you said, when you're a movie star or a TV star, there's a factor called bankability. Mm-hmm. And if you sign up to, and then you were cut off, I don't think that was just someone hacking around. I think you were edited then, right there. You were edited out, and you couldn't finish what you were saying. The next day, I think it was on one of these, or was it Sunday? I can't remember if it was Saturday or Sunday, but there was this discussion on TV by the corporate media about Trump no longer being a good candidate to endorse products because he's too impulsive, you know, absolutely turning against him. It's like, I think he had no choice but to do this for some reason. It could be what you were stating before about, yes, they had the votes to impeach him, mm-hmm. and et cetera, but they didn't have any, ability to do that. I mean, they didn't have the proof.
Well, you know,
they can always drum something up.
We have Chernovich. We have Chernovich, who's out there saying that McMaster's is editing the intelligence reports going to Trump. They may have simply lied to him to his face. They all stood. I mean, remember last week Trump was saying his entire cabinet agreed this was the thing to do. Trump may be cut off from the real world by his own White House staff, and it's another reason why he really should have cleaned house when he went on in there. And apparently another one of his top people is stepping down, going to become an ambassador. Anyway, Sherry, I need to let you go. Got two more calls I'm going to take. Then we're going to close the lines for a while because I really have got so much more to talk about. Mark in Georgia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I'm sure you're familiar with war as a racket. You cited one of the lines in your all wars are bankers' wars. I think we need to update this. I mean, to go into it exhaustively would take volumes, but if we could concisely point out that FDR was a traitor and a liar when he claimed the Japanese attacked without provocation. And I trust you may find you appreciate the humor. I told my pastor about this recently. When I refer to certain mute donkeys, write this down. 2 Peter 2:16. Yeah, in the King James Version. You may find some humor in that.
Okay.
But the thing is, a real republic requires people be informed. And when people call themselves conservative, informed, either misinformed or disinformed or just plain wrong. And that's the thing is that we need to reinstate the republic with the rule of law, with a government where the treason of lying us into war is properly punished.
I agree with you on that one.
Very briefly, the 50th anniversary of the attack on the Liberty, I'm pretty sure I saw Phil Turney on Facebook. I trust you're going to you and Mr. John Satmiller are going to have him on that anniversary. That's going to be a pretty heavy day for him, I'm pretty sure. So it's something you might want to prepare in advance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. We'll have somebody from the Liberty, the survivors, on the show on that day. And, it'll be interesting to see how Donald Trump either acknowledges or ignores that anniversary. Apparently tonight they're having Seder at the White House. So anyway, Mark, going to let you go. Going to take one more phone call from Andrea in Oklahoma, and then we're going to close the lines for a while because I got a bunch of stuff to get to. Andrea, what is on your mind today?
Yes, aloha. Rick Steves on OETA, PBS, had a big, where he went to Iran, and, of course, he always tries to learn a little bit of the language and talk to the people, and this wonderful, he went throughout the whole country showing all these beautiful places and how kind and how friendly the people were, and how this family had him into their house. And he ended the show by, we really need to open our hearts and, stop reacting and find out, what the real reason is, because this is a wonderful country. It has so much to offer. And when it came to Trump and hearing that whenever he reacted, he was in front of another man, another leader, I guess a Chinese leader or something, and that he reacted so quickly, it reminded me of General Custer and how you could be drugged into being massacred. If you're not looking and paying attention, you can be massacred by moving too quickly and not thinking things through.
Absolutely agree with you on that one. And I've got some other stories that touch on that very topic a little bit further in the show. So, Andrea, I'm going to let you go. We are closing the phone lines until further notice. Now, it is obvious at this point that the corporate media and the war hawks are understanding they've got a big credibility problem. People are not buying this Assad gassed his own people story because it doesn't make any sense. It never did. Assad was all but winning his war against the U.S.-backed rebels. They were starting peace talks to bring the war to a complete end. A little over a week ago, the White House was saying Assad can stay on as president if he wins his next election. It was all going Assad's way. There was no reason for him to do something that was going to instantly turn world opinion against him. The gas attack accomplished no military gain whatsoever, especially because the attack was against civilians and children. And that was deliberate to create shocking images that Nikki Haley could wave around at the UN and saying, see, it's horrible, the way that Colin Powell was wagging around his little vial of what they said was anthrax, but was probably just powdered sugar. It's all theater and all show. The story about Assad gassing his own people, it makes no sense. He had no motive. He had nothing to gain and everything to lose. And so now they're trying to push back and reassert the lies and bolster them with more lies here. And there was a story over at PolitiFact, no less, saying that conspiracy claims that Syrian gas attack was a false flag are unproven. And basically they go on out there and they say, well, we looked and we didn't see any evidence that this could be a false flag at all, and therefore by default you will accept the government's story. No, by default, the burden of proof is on the government and the corporate media. And I note PolitiFact didn't actually go out to look for credible evidence that Assad actually did what he's accused of doing. Now, let's be honest here. The U.S. government has a long and dark track record of using lies to justify invasions. We all remember that whopper about Saddam's nuclear weapons. We all remember that back in 2013, the U.S. government tried to claim Assad gassed his own people. Subsequent investigations by the UN and MIT said it was the U.S.-backed rebels trying to frame Assad. Then the U.S. government tried the same thing in 2014. Oh, Assad is gassing his own people. The UN chemical weapons inspector said no. Once again, it was the U.S.-backed rebels. They even tried it in November of last year. Assad is using chlorine gas on his own people. I mean, if you think about it, it's just absurd. It never made any sense. Assad doesn't have a motive to do this. Assad's enemies do. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me hundreds and hundreds of times, shame on me. We've been down this road before. We know it leads to disaster. So, article on the same topic from Russia Today, the $64 question, where is the U.S. evidence that Assad was behind whatever it is that happened at Idlib? And what they're getting from Nikki Haley, the UN envoy, is pictures of dead children. That's it. And she says it bears all the hallmarks of Assad's regime's use of chemicals. It's never once been documented Assad ever used such things. It's always a lie after a lie after a lie. They're building on the lies again. They're raising on a busted flesh. And Russia's foreign ministry came on out and said, we need something a little more substantial. This shows us a chemical attack may have taken place, but it doesn't tell us who did it. And Nikki Haley comes back and says, well, we have classified evidence. We have classified evidence that proves Assad did this. You're just going to have to take our word for it. Boy, that's a tall order, especially looking back at stolen Iraqi incubators and Saddam's weapons of mass destruction. And the corporate media is fully on board with this. They've lined up, and they're basically saying the entire case that Assad did this comes from a doctor in the al-Qaeda-controlled Syrian province of Idlib, Sajul Islam. And he's being cited everywhere for saying that this was Assad's fault. There's only one problem. This guy has been up on terrorism charges. He kidnapped journalists. He works for ISIS and al-Qaeda. He's demonstrably part of the group that wants to bring Assad down. And yet he's being cited as an absolutely unimpeachable source. Along with, of course, the white helmets who have been outed as working for ISIS. Now, they're ramping up the propaganda. And you're not going to believe this one. Over at the Daily Mail, they've identified the pilot who dropped that sarin bomb that killed the Syrians. And they're saying it was basically a general in Syria's Air Force who carried out another gas attack last month. I have a clue for you over at the Daily Mail. Generals do not fly combat missions. That's what the rank-and-file pilots are for. Generals are too expensive and important to risk. Again, they're just making this stuff up out of thin air. Now, there's another one that was making the rounds earlier today where somebody took a clip showing a pile of these canisters in part of the bombed-out portions of the airfield and said, these are chemical weapons canisters. This proves this was a center for chemical weapons. They're now trying to justify the bombing retroactively by saying they were going after Assad's stockpiles of chemical weapons. Well, first of all, if you've got a chemical weapon stockpile, the very last thing you want to do is bomb it, because then it's going to spread on out and kill a lot of people. But as it turns out, the canisters are clearly marked as containing warheads for fragmentation bombs. And some of the bombs can actually be seen in the debris field. And don't forget, the U.S. claimed they did not attack any chemical weapons at the base. So they wouldn't have been targeting this hangar area. Remember during the Iraq War, there was this picture they were showing around of this green trailer with all this machinery in the back, and they were screaming, it's a mobile biological weapons laboratory. They're making anthrax there to send to you. And it turned out it was a hydrogen gas generator used to inflate weather balloons, and everybody knew that's what it was because they're manufactured in Great Britain, who sold it to Iraq. And that's all it was, but they'll just take a picture and they'll say, this is what it is. Don't think, don't analyze, just believe us. Even the Pentagon's getting in on this one. Over at Breitbart, they're running a story. Pentagon official, there is no credible alternative to the Syrian regime carrying out the chemical attacks. There's no credible alternative. You will believe as we tell you to believe. And if you believe that one, I have some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. How many times do you have to be lied to before you're ready to stand up and shout to the government and corporate media, you are all liars, you are full of it, and I am not listening to you anymore, especially when we're looking at a major war that will kill and cripple millions around the world, possibly go nuclear. That's how dangerous and risky this is. We apparently have true believers in the Pentagon who are convinced they can win a nuclear war, even in the face of the apparent failures of much of our modern weapon systems. Brian Williams, who you have to wonder why he still has a job after being outed for all the lies he's told in the past, was out there looking at the video of the launch of the missiles and saying, they're beautiful. Oh, isn't it beautiful? Isn't it beautiful? Well, during the launch, maybe, yeah, but Brian, you ought to be over on the place where those missiles come down. I don't think you'd be as enthusiastic. But then that's his job. He's paid to get you caught up in the excitement. Oh, my goodness, we're going to war. It's going to be fun and beautiful. I almost feel like playing Tom Lehrer's Songs for World War III. It's that overt. Now, there was a piece of news that was put out earlier today, and unfortunately a lot of people carried it. Reuters carried this story that Iran and Russia issued a joint statement to the United States, a warning that the next time the U.S. struck Syria, Iran and Russia would attack the United States of America. And everybody ran with this thing. And it looks like it's another hoax to get everybody scared of Russia and Iran and what they might do. Don't think, just be afraid. If you're afraid, we can control you. Because there's been zero confirmation from either Russia or Iran that this actually happened. I mean, the bovine excrement has hit the tsunami stage here in this country. Get the hip waders out. It's getting slippery out there. Going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, back up at the United Nations, Nikki Haley is out there frothing at the mouth, screaming about Russia and Iran and saying there's nothing that's off the table, that the United States is going to act when we need to act. Somebody needs to tell Nikki Haley to stop acting like she's the U.S. president, if not president of the world. The daily threats to other nations are not helping things stand down. Interestingly enough, in his White House press briefing, Sean Spicer, without any clear indication of why, is lumping North Korea in with the designated targets. He literally came on out and said, quote, Russia stands with Syria, North Korea, and Iran, end quote. The axis of evil. Now, here's a really bogus story, I think. This was reported in Press TV. And apparently the story now is that Ivanka's heartbroken response to the photos of the gassed babies is what prompted Donald Trump to order the Syria attack. And this could be just more trying to spread the blame around. So nobody is really held responsible for this flustercluck. I thought Ivanka had brains. But if she does not see through the obviousness of the lie about Assad gassing his own people, then she's just another body by Fisher, brains by Mattel lassie. I can almost just see the meeting. You know, Donald Trump is out there. Did those photos upset you? And Ivanka, yes, they do. They make me very unhappy. Trump says, do you want Daddy to beat up the bad man who did that? Ivanka says, yes, please. So Trump comes back and says, okay, Daddy will beat up the bad man for you. Well, if this is somehow remotely true, this portrays Trump as making reckless decisions in the moment based on emotions, and that is a very bad quality to have in a president. And remember, 37 of those cruise missiles did not hit the base. They flew on. And they're known to have struck at least 3 other villages, killing civilians and children. I wonder how Ivanka feels about that. Apparently she's very proud of her daddy for doing that. We're getting word now that K.T. McFarland is leaving the Trump White House to serve as ambassador to Singapore. but apparently it's rather abrupt. And she's leaving her role as Deputy National Security Advisor. And I'm wondering if Trump is realizing that he's being lied to, or if the forces around him are trying to have a purge and get rid of anybody who might question the official story, like they're trying to do to Tulsi Gabbard. All right, we're going to grab a quick phone. Well, no, there's the music. We'll take the phone call when we come back from station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. We're going to take one phone call, then we're again going to close the phone lines. Mo in Florida, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Michael. Yeah, it was a very somber time. I have to tell you, I voted for Trump, Pence. I feel betrayed. I want to get your comments. I know you want to close the phone line, so I'll try to be brief. Anybody that knows anything about China knows that saving face is for that culture is the biggest thing in the world. I mean,
yes.
Americans, Westerners don't really understand it. But for him to, when I saw him at Mar-a-Lago, which is not too far from where I live, what he did to this, she was horrible. He could have spit in his face and slapped him right in public. It wouldn't have been as bad as what he did to invite him to dinner and then just, oh, by the way, we dropped tomahawk bombs on your ally. I mean, there will be repercussions, and I don't blame China one bit. This is terrible. This is insulting. Not only was it wrong, not only was it phony, not only was it a false flag. This is a slap and a spit in the face to the Chinese, who own our biggest creditor.
Yes.
What is he, nuts? This guy makes me sick. Other than Ron Paul or Rand Paul, I'm done. I wish I didn't have family here. I'd leave this country right now. I'd just get your thoughts.
Well, a lot of people are making that decision right now. And again, we are all tremendously disappointed in Donald Trump, but it's not all of his own doing. We're dealing with a systemic problem. The entire federal government has been corrupted by war profiteering, drug money, self-interest, and they're just going to keep on grabbing what they want to grab, and to heck with what anybody else wants. And it is systemic. We've learned a hard lesson this last election. Changing the president doesn't change the system. We have to change the system directly. Anyway, Mo, we're going to let you go. Thanks an awful lot. Getting on back to the world's condemnation of what Donald Trump has done, Germany's Die Linke Party is out there saying bombs do not make peace, and they are not aligning with Merkel and Holland, who are out there saying, oh, yes, this is a good thing. We're your leaders. You think what we tell you to think, and what we're telling you to think is that the cruise missile attack on Syria was fully justified, Assad is an evil genius, and this is all really good. And it's not really convincing their people any more than it is over here. Peter O'Born is out there saying that Theresa May appears to be going back to being another poodle for the U.S. And he's out there saying that he personally does not share the Foreign Office hawk's joy over the U.S. missile attack. This is factionalizing governments all around the world. I mean, forget about destabilizing the situation in Syria. This is destabilizing diplomatic relations all over the world. We are in incredible danger. Now, in other news coming out of Syria, following the cruise missile attack on the base, apparently the U.S.-led coalition is running air raids in western Raqqa and bombed 2 ferries crossing the Euphrates River. On one of them, a mother and all 6 of her children drowned. We don't know what happened to the passengers on the other ferry. But, of course, the corporate media is not going to talk about this. They're only interested in dead children that further the war agenda. They don't care about dead children that might lead you to think the war is a bad thing. Same thing with Yemen. There's a huge humanitarian crisis down in Yemen, even worse than Syria. The Saudis are starving the people of Yemen. But they don't count. We can't use the starving people of Yemen because we're not at war with Saudi Arabia. We only focus on the children who are starving in countries we want to take over. Now, getting on to North Korea. That situation is also getting very ugly very quickly. Now, North Korea says that the Syria airstrikes prove that it is justified in having nuclear weapons. And they are now saying they are going to bolster their defenses to protect themselves against airstrikes by the United States based on lies and propaganda. And when they first came on out with this nonsense about how the strikes on Syria were going to send a message to North Korea, I said, yeah, it's going to send a message, but not the one you want. Because the whole world knows that that story about Assad gassing his own people was made up out of thin air. It's a false flag attack. And it's just the latest example where the U.S. government will lie about somebody in order to declare a war. Stolen incubators, Saddam's nuclear weapons, Assad's gas, they've tried that one several times before. So that's the message that went on out. The U.S. is a rogue nation. At any time, without any warning, they can make up a story about you and take over your country. And as I warned last week, that means that countries that already have nuclear weapons are going to hang on to them that much tighter. And those countries that do not have nuclear weapons are trying to find them or get them. Maybe they can buy them from the black market, Israel. Remember, Israel was caught trying to sell nuclear weapons to South Africa, the former government of South Africa. So we know they're in the business. The Non-Proliferation Treaty guarantees Israel a monopoly on nuclear weapons. We're going to do a quick shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our nation. So, story coming out of scmp.com, U.S. and North Korea closer to brink of accidental conflict. And they're talking about the concerns raised by the U.S. Navy strike group headed by the USS Carl Vinson. And they're going to have this show of force off the Korean Peninsula, which will probably provoke some kind of response from North Korea. Now, the Trump administration has issued a warning to North Korea against provocation. That's kind of an interesting little comment. I don't see any North Korean warships around our state here in the middle of the Pacific. I don't think there's any of them along the coast of California, Oregon, or Washington. I think the provocation is entirely on the side of the United States. And what the plan is going to be is any move North Korea undertakes to protect its own security will be declared the provocation. How dare you shoot down our planes while we're bombing your country? That's the provocation. We are now justified to go to war. Now, the former chief of MI6 in Great Britain, Sir John Soros, is saying that it looks to him like Trump is going to launch a catastrophic war on North Korea. Another story coming out of the newsantiwar.com. U.S. intelligence chiefs urge Trump to assassinate Kim and other North Korean leaders. They're pushing for a decapitation strike. And now that that's actually out there, I can tell you what's going to happen. Kim is going to set up a dead man switch for himself. On the event he is killed, whatever weapons he actually has that work are going to be fired in all directions. Donald Trump has ordered his generals to provide options for taking out Kim's nuclear weapons and is telling the military to prepare to remove the North Korean threat. North Korea isn't threatening anybody. The U.S. is doing all the threatening. This is all coming through H.R. McMaster. It looks like he's the one who's really pulling the strings. And they're talking about potential preemptive strikes. Now, a newspaper in South Korea is reporting that China has deployed 150,000 troops to the North Korea border. Now, I seriously doubt that China is going to participate in an attack on North Korea by the United States. It looks to me like China is afraid of war creep. Remember, World War I was originally between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, but somehow mutated to make Germany the enemy. And obviously, Roosevelt used the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor to pivot the war against Adolf Hitler. And so China has a reasonable grounds to feel that the U.S. invasion of North Korea is an attempt to open a backdoor to that long-sought war with China, because Russia and China are the ultimate targets because of the ruble and the yuan. That's what's driving all of this. And I think we are all justifiably concerned if they attack North Korea, and North Korea really does have deployable nuclear weapons. They do have rockets that can reach Alaska and here in Hawaii. And I don't imagine Kim Jong-un is particularly angry with the polar bears, so that leaves this island, Oahu, through which all of the communications for the entire Pacific Fleet are channeled. Now, as you know, yesterday there were some terrorist bombings in Egypt, killed 44 people, mostly Coptic Christians. But you're not going to see their dead bodies on TV because we're not trying to invade and take over Egypt. We already did that a while ago. So let's talk about the economic news here, because the indicators are not good. And we know that one of the reasons for the rush to war is the U.S. government absolutely believes that anytime the economy is in a hopeless mess, getting into a world war will fix it. Because after all, it worked the last two times. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, and look how many countries the U.S. has attacked and invaded. Future history books are going to say we're already in World War III right now. It's just escalating upward. Now, the reality is war is not good for the economy. And by the way, with the news that China was moving those troops down to the Korean border, the stock market took a hit. The only business that does well out of war are the bankers. They get this rich harvest of debt. And they don't care which side wins or loses because they make money off of both sides. They loan money to both sides to fight the war. They loan money to both sides to rebuild from the war. And that's what's really behind all of this, keeping us slaves to private central banker debt. And again, they don't care which side wins or loses. As long as there's a war, they're happy. Now, Paul Craig Roberts is out there calling attention to the fact that much of the economic news being issued by the U.S. government and parroted by the corporate media is, in fact, false. And he goes through an analysis of the unemployment numbers compared to active participation numbers, and he said, it doesn't line up. It's obvious the U.S. government is lying about this, just as they lie about everything else. There's a very loud noise out there. The euro's value is plunging as Marine Le Pen's chances of winning the French election rise higher and higher. She is pulling ahead in the polls. And apparently, the anti-Brussels candidate, her promise of a Frexit vote is worrying the markets. Now, H.H. Gregg has decided they're going to close all of their stores. The commercial bank loan creation system seems to be collapsing and is having a domino effect. Dollar Express is going to close all 323 of their stores. That's almost 3,000 jobs right there. And when the bargain basement dollar stores can't make it in retail, you know retail is really in a world of hurt. Now, apparently a recording made in 2008 has surfaced that appears to implicate the Bank of England in the LIBOR rigging scandal. This is coming from Courtney Goldsmith for City AM. And apparently the recording was uncovered by the BBC, and it adds to the evidence that the Bank of England repeatedly pressured commercial banks to lower their benchmark rates during the 2008 financial crisis. Things we no longer believe in now includes bankers being honest, government being good, corporate media being truthful. Now, one good move that the Trump administration is starting to make is they're targeting what are called the fake stock news on the top financial websites. And we have seen this same phenomenon going on over in various health websites. WebMD got kind of scandalized by this a while back, where the articles that are being presented as news are in fact written by people with vested interests, a product to sell, an agenda to push, and then they pay the websites to post the article. And apparently it's been a big problem in the financial news websites, leading to stock manipulation. So your classic bump and dump. Oh, this stock is on the way up. You must buy into it now. And pump and dump stock scams are also a major source of junk email. I used to get those things all the time, you know, this is a hot stock. It's on its way up. You need to buy on in. Huge amounts of spam. Now, up at the G7 summit in Italy, protesters are clashing with police. They keep describing the protesters as anti-capitalist. No, technically they're anti-fascist, because fascism is a system in which corporate interest and government authority are aligned together against the general population, and that's what these people are protesting. Now, Great Britain and the United States are up at the G7 demanding more sanctions on Russia, and they're getting a very, very cool reception. And Russian political analyst Alexei Zudin is saying that these G7 countries are probably going to reject these calls for new Russian sanctions for a couple of reasons. Mostly because the G7 realized that that original Assad gassed his own people story doesn't make any sense. They realize the U.S. always lies to start wars of aggression. And perhaps most important to the G7, the Russian sanctions have caused more harm to Europe than to Russia. And they don't need any more of that grief. They're tired of suffering for the U.S. and Great Britain's dreams of global domination. Meanwhile, something we're all aware has been in the planning for a long time. The IMF has now issued a working paper on how to eliminate all cash all over the world to make you a slave to that little plastic card so that they know what you're buying, when you're buying it, they know where your money is. They can block a run on the bank because there's no way to take your wealth out of the bank. You are now dependent on the bank to store your wealth for you. No more coinage. I guarantee you they're going to ban private ownership of gold and silver. Anything that could be a portable store of value will be declared illegal. You will keep all of your wealth inside the bank, and the bank will have the right to use it to keep the bank solvent. That's where they're going with this. It's a desperate, desperate attempt to avoid the reality that private central banking is a Ponzi scheme. And under globalism, it's all become one giant Ponzi scheme, and sooner or later it is going to implode. And they're trying to figure out how they can steal your money to keep themselves rich just a little while longer. That's what this eliminating cash thing is all about. Now, apparently, Target's earnings reports for the last quarter are now out, and apparently they have taken a major hit over that transgender bathroom policy. People boycotted Target. Target was saying it's no big deal. Now they're having the final numbers out, and they're having to admit, yeah, this was a big deal. Now, over in Austria, their richest man, Dietrich Mateschitz, I think, he's the guy who owns the Red Bull energy drink, and he's Austria's richest man. And he's saying this mass migration and political correctness are actually destroying Europe's true cultural diversity. It's just turning into a mishmash of competing ideas, competing religions, competing languages. It's like the old story of the Tower of Babel, where everybody had a different language all of a sudden, and nobody could get along. And that's exactly what's going on over there in Europe. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and boy, there's still so much to cover here. But we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And apparently Donald Trump has notified the Australian government to be on the lookout for a North Korean rocket attack. There's also a video that came on out about 3 years ago that supposedly was leaked from inside North Korea, but in all probability is another piece of propaganda where North Korea is railing against Washington, D.C., Colorado Springs, Los Angeles, and Hawaii, of which only Hawaii is within range of North Korea's missiles, which is one of the reasons I'm a little nervous about what's going on right now. Now, California has now declared itself a sanctuary state. Muslims and illegal immigrants are rejoicing. Okay. As you know, Donald Trump has started building his wall. And liberals have now come up with a new way to block the wall. And they're filing a lawsuit saying that there's an endangered species that would be harmed by the wall. Jaguars. If the jaguars cannot get across the border, then they can't eat American children and they will starve to death, and that would be a horrible, horrible thing. Now, it is a fantasy because jaguars are primarily in Mexico. 99% of all the world's jaguars are below that border. But Judicial Watch is saying they're attempting to file a lawsuit to stop the wall on this very flimsy pretext. Now, the wall, I don't think, is really necessary. We're already seeing a major drop in cross-border traffic because these people are being identified and sent back. If you remove the financial incentive for these people to come to this country illegally, if you treat them like the criminals they are, it's going to stop, and you don't really need the wall. If they come across the border illegally and they can't work and they can't buy food and they can't buy water and they can't pay rent, do you think they're going to stay here? Of course not. Now, as you know, they had an horrific terror attack in Stockholm where an asylum seeker who had been told he was going to be sent back rammed a truck into a crowd of people. And this has woken the government of Sweden up, finally, from all of its feminist, liberal, politically correct. And the country's prime minister is saying, we're not going to go back to the days of mass immigration. That is now over and done with. All right, let's start taking some phone calls here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hey, I just want to let people know, if you attack North Korea, in the first 15 minutes, 12 million people are going to die in Seoul because of the 13,000 artillery pieces. He doesn't even have to use any nuclear weapons to get rid of Seoul. You know, people need to realize that something's going on here, man.
No, what is going on here is the U.S. government is absolutely convinced, and they may be right, that without a new world war, the United States of America is finished. The problem is, from where I sit, even with a new world war, the United States is finished. It's just going to be a lot messier if they go the war route.
Yeah, do you realize only 5 nuclear weapons, maybe 3, have to be hit here, like New York or Washington or Los Angeles? If New York gets hit, the whole East Coast power grid will go off forever.
Well, not forever, but definitely will be that. I mean, there's also the EMP factor. Military power systems are now hardened against EMP. The civilian power system isn't. All it takes is one atomic bomb outside the atmosphere to stir up the Earth's magnetosphere, and those long transmission lines will just pick it up by induction and generate a pulse of hundreds of volts or thousands of volts.
It's just, I just still can't believe, Mike, this total turnaround. Like, it's the quickest turnaround in the history of the world, don't you think?
I agree, and I don't know it's because McMaster's apparently is lying to Donald Trump about what's going on, or that Donald Trump really is stupid enough to believe the Assad gassed his own people's story, or he's being blackmailed or threatened. We don't know. It's almost irrelevant. At this point, this nation is on course to start a major global conflict which ultimately we are going to lose. Thank you for the phone call, Dustin. We're going to let you go. We'll be right back. And aloha. Welcome back to the show here. I was looking at the crawl on the Fox News Network, and it's just saying simply, next target, North Korea. And the reason for that rush is because the attack on Syria, the cover story is falling apart. Nobody is buying Assad gassed his own people. The story just doesn't make any sense. Well, rather than try and keep reasserting, we're telling the truth, you believe as we tell you to, they're going to give us another distraction. Oh, we're going to go to North Korea. Syria, that was last week's news. We're going to go to North Korea. And they're probably trying to think up of some really spectacular false flag to get us all hot and bothered to send other people's children into North Korea. So, John in Texas. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing? Yes, I want to tell you why the attack in the air base and why all the West is for gassing its people is because Israel had just attacked that base weeks ago. You had reported on that Israel lost a couple of planes or drones.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And you know, it just shows you that Israel controls the narrative. And then going on to your point about the IMF banning cash, I mean, I could see them thinking, you know, because you know how the Islamic world just said gold is not going to be used as a like they're not going to basically deal in the paper. It's going to be physical.
Yes.
So I could see them tying that together and shutting that down and trying to convince, like saying, "Oh, you're a terrorist," you know.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Russia and China are trading directly in their own indigenous currencies. They're refusing to go through the U.S. dollar. And even more importantly, they're basing the system on gold. And as you know, Russia and China have been buying gold like crazy. This is a major, major threat to the private central bankers. And if you have not read my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, you need to. It's permanently linked near the top of the main page at whatreallyhappened.com. But that's what's driving this, the money junkies.
I got some other news, too. Do you remember in Connecticut when they were trying to get them to register their guns and, like, 90% of the gun owners didn't, right?
Yes.
Well, they had but like a month ago, Connecticut's going to be the first state to use drones with lethal force on them.
Yeah.
That shows you that the police state is, everything is going as planned. Whether we thought we could try to stop it or not with electing a man or a human, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then the last one, you said something about Israeli, and we don't know how many nukes, how big the nukes they have, or what type they have, right?
Well, they were
selling them to everybody, right?
Well, we know for a fact they tried to sell one to the former government of South Africa. And I can't imagine that Israel is going to turn down a lucrative black market operation like that. But we do not know how many or what type of weapons Israel has, because Israel refuses to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty and they refuse IAEA inspections. Now, we know their first-generation weapons were straight uranium fission bombs. They got most of the uranium was stolen right here in the United States of America through what was called the Numex scandal. But I'm sure that Israel has developed beyond that. The photos that were leaked by Mordecai Vanunu certainly show them working with plutonium implosion devices. And from there, it's just a short step to a multi-stage thermonuclear weapon. So we don't know what they've got and how big they are or where they are. For all we know, North Korea actually bought their nuclear weapons from Israel rather than develop them themselves.
Did you talk about those troops assembling on the Jordanian border?
Yes, I did.
About to head to Raqqa?
Yep.
You think, and we know Israel worked with ISIS, right?
I don't know that they're about to head to Raqqa. They're ideally positioned for a blitz into Damascus itself, and Alex Jones is reporting that there is a U.S. Marine amphibious landing ship just off the coast of Syria, right across from Damascus.
And Israel is working with ISIS, right? We got proof of that, right?
Yeah, well, ISIS is this made-up group that's working for Israel and for the United States. That's why Hillary Clinton was sending ISIS all these weapons. We were being shown videos about how horrible and terrible they are, and you know, it's just more of the propaganda.
Could you see Israel giving ISIS a nuke, or do you think they already gave them a nuke? Because ISIS, everybody hates ISIS, right? So
yes.
If they would use a nuke, it wouldn't matter how the world thinks of them, right? Because their whole point is just to, I mean, look at the V-bed attack. So they wouldn't mind. And that's what I'm thinking. Like, imagine if all the troops get into Raqqa and they're about to capture it, and then, like, how big of a nuke would you need to, like, destroy, like, how big is Raqqa? Like, the size of what? Like a Detroit or a San Antonio?
No, it's not as big as that. I would say probably, a 150 kiloton tactical warhead would make a pretty fair job of it.
Is that pretty compact?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really a nuclear weapons expert, but I mean, it's small enough to be carried underneath an airplane.
Well, that's cause for concern right there.
Well, I agree it's cause for concern,
the airplane.
but more in the context of North Korea, because the whole point about needing to invade North Korea is because they have nuclear weapons and a crazy government, which sounds
a lot like
our...
North Korea can't even feed their own people. North Korea can't even feed their own people, so what are they going to do when they build a nuke? They're going to have 10,000 Koreans throw it at us?
Well, look at how many people are going hungry. Hey, let me finish a thought, okay? Look how many people are going to bed hungry in the United States today. Look at the conditions of our roads, bridges, and infrastructure. The United States is...
they spent 95...
Okay, well, again, much of what you think you know about North Korea is coming from that same corporate media that swore up and down Saddam had nuclear weapons. Anyway, John, going to let you go. We're going to go to another John. This one's in Chicago. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, well, just quickly, I'd piggyback on what Dustin said about the turnaround. I mean, Mike, your show for the last 2 days has sounded like you've sounded for the last 3 years of Obama's presidency. I mean, you've got to be sitting beside yourself. You can't believe we're here again.
No, I can't. I'm very upset that we are here again. And whether it's, you call it the deep state or the establishment or just again, as Eisenhower said, the military-industrial complex is a power unto itself. And the military-industrial complex needs war to prosper.
Yeah, that was me. I sent you the Sean Spicer clip, and the reason I sent it to you and the reason I'm watching those is because, as far as I'm concerned, the Kremlin or any other government sitting around, they're not watching the Fox News channel and listening to propaganda. They're going to listen to what that White House says. So when Sean Spicer spouts off recklessly like that and just says those stupid things, the White House is going to have to give an answer for it. So if there's any quote-unquote threats coming out, it's going to come out of Sean Spicer's mouth, not anything on Fox News. You know, like you had said, 37 of the missiles missed their target. Yep. Sean Hannity went on TV Friday night and said all the missiles hit their targets with precision accuracy, all 100%. Now, I mean, between you and him, you see we're right there again.
Yep, we are right there again. I mean, unless Hannity is out there saying that America intended to blow up these villages full of civilians and children.
Yeah, Fox News, they're as happy as McCain. That's all there is to it. They're as happy as McCain. All the retired generals that they have on as commentators, they all get to come back and get paid. Ollie North he's got a boner. I mean, I'm tired of this. This is so bad for us right now.
Well, you know, the corporate media loves war for the same reason the bankers do. Everybody's going to tune on in to see the live video feed from all the death and destruction. It's like the modern incarnation of Rome's gladiatorial combat. We get to see executions. Huzzah, huzzah, where's my loaf of bread? And it is, you know, in the news business, they keep saying, if it bleeds, it leads. If it thinks, it stinks. And that, unfortunately, is the way the business works. I mean, all the way back to William Randolph Hearst, when he literally helped President McKinley frame Spain for the sinking of the USS Maine. He did it knowing that a new war would sell more of his newspapers, and he would be rich enough to go on out and finish that big castle he built in California.
Well, right, and the other thing is, like you had said just a week ago, the Operation Mockingbirds never stopped. It's worse now than it's ever been.
Oh, absolutely, no question. John, going to let you go. Going to take another phone call, then we got to get back to doing some news. Dan in Washington State, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, thanks for taking the call. I just want to say I haven't thrown Trump. I've called all the shows. A lot of people are totally against Trump that supported him. And mostly on the immigration issue, I'm still with him 80%. I think he's in a tough spot because he's not a dictator. And I think he basically had to give kind of the Jewish neocons or the neocons warmongers like a pound of flesh or they weren't going to let him be in office. And I think
that's one of the theories that I heard, is that he was told by the leadership, as it were, the war agenda is going forward either with you or without you. All you can choose is whether you're going to stay the President of the United States of America. That's the story I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard so many different theories, and it's like Trump has everyone baffled, and I think he's done more on immigration than anybody in my lifetime, but with Syria, it seems like just a gorilla pounding his chest thing. I personally think this could be a way to give Syria to Russia, to have Russia draw a red line and then threaten war, and then we're basically out of Syria totally, I'm hoping.
Well, the problem with that is that Syria has always been closely aligned with Russia. They're trying to break that and put in a new government that is going to swing toward the West, like they were trying to do in Ukraine. They staged a coup against a pro-Russian government, drove them on out, put in President Chocolate, who immediately started saying we're going to merge with the EU, and look what a mess that's turned into. Syria could very easily be just as chaotic. I mean, just think about the sheer volume of death and misery and suffering that is being caused by this U.S. agenda of let's get everybody working for our economic system. This clash of civilizations is really just a war between banking systems. And I'm sorry, ink and paper is not, to me, a good reason to go to war and kill other people.
I agree with you. I have a hard time believing they would do that. Like, I think, because Russia moved in their S-300 and 400 systems, and then you have the guy in Russia talking about let's have the war here if you want it, and all they really have to do is move in some major missile systems, and they could take out any battleship fleet we have, any army on the border. I mean, it's kind of a done deal if Russia just moves in all their equipment. There's nothing we could do without starting World War III, like, instantly.
Yeah. All right, well, listen, I'm going to let you go and get on back to the news here. Actually, we're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to get back to the news. Alex in San Antonio, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I was calling because, like many of the listeners, I'm a little distraught. And I'm hoping maybe that you because you always seem to have a caveat, you know, because like you say, you know, there's always a caveat because the lies actually have to make sense, you know, and you know we happen to find ourselves at a crux here, and it's just, you know, no one believes that Assad did this, but we may very well have the technical capability to still wage war without the consent of the governed. And I'm wondering if maybe what does happen is that there is an actual break, and maybe this is the way that they break the United States. You know what I mean? Like maybe this is. I don't
think they're intending to break the United States, but I think they definitely could, because this thing is already spinning out of control. And already the U.S. is talking about other red lines for Syria. Now they're saying if Syria uses a barrel bomb, we're going to go on in and crater the place. If Assad throws spit wads at anybody, we're going to go on in. I mean, they're just basically ramping up a list. No matter what Assad does, there are more bombing attacks coming on in. And we are risking open conflict with Russia. And that, again, you know, the U.S. wants Russia destroyed, that ruble to be destroyed. Israel would love nothing better than for the United States and Russia to get stuck in a mutually destructive nuclear war, which would leave Israel and their nuclear arsenal basically in charge of the Middle East, and through that Middle East oil resource, basically running the planet. Israel wouldn't mind that one tiny bit. All right, got to let you go. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to go ahead and close the lines again because I do have some news to get to. Glenn in Philadelphia, aloha, what's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. There's a new YouTube video up of Bashar al-Assad tap dancing barefoot on shag carpet.
Oh, okay.
And so now, in the response, we're running armored units into Syria from Jordan. So they're not screwing around.
No, but, they aren't.
Actually, I actually called about Tillerson and Kushner. First, Tillerson, I'm hearing in the mainstream media today that Tillerson is saying that Russia needs to accept the fact that they have to stop supporting Bashar al-Assad. And I think the goal is for basically this balkanization. They're going to go for it now, and they're going to, do a larger American presence there. And I think they want to divvy it up into sections for the Kurds, the Turks, Israel, and the U.S. It just seems to me that's how they would want to divvy it up.
Yeah, and the big question is, is Russia going to appear to show weakness and back down? I don't think so. That's why this situation, basically Trump is bluffing. He's pounding his chest. Somebody was sending me an email saying that Trump is playing chess with Putin. No, he's playing poker. He's playing hearts.
Yeah.
It's out there, you will back down. The United States does not have any kind of legal authority to tell any other government they must or must not do something. And
especially since the Russians were invited in by the duly recognized government,
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, and America always shows up at chess match prepared to play checkers. But and one thing about Kushner, he and his wife, Trump's daughter, are members of this. At least Kushner, Jared is member of Chabad Lubavitch, which is this little Jewish ultra-Orthodox sect of followers of Menachem Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who passed away years ago, but yet they still hold him in esteem as a Messiah figure, much in the same way as the Rastafarians hold Haile Selassie in esteem as a Messiah figure. Okay. It's a very strange and aberrant little Jewish group, ultra-Orthodox Jewish group, and I'm just wondering, where he's getting his orders.
Well, probably from Israel. And Glenn, I got to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines again, and we'll be back after these few commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to do a little more news, then we'll open up the phone lines again here. I really am starting to admire Marine Le Pen. Like Tulsi Gabbard, she knows her own mind. She doesn't go along with the prevailing conventional wisdom. And apparently, Marine Le Pen has taken the position that the people of modern-day France bear no responsibility for the roundup of Jews in France during World War II. Now, former French presidents like Chirac and Hollande, the current president, have apologized to Israel for the role the French played in the roundup of the Jews and blah, 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 blah. And Le Pen makes a very, very valid point. All the people who did that are dead and gone. And if you want to find somebody to blame, you go to those who were in power at the time, and it wasn't France, it was Nazi Germany. So she's refusing to kowtow to the Israel lobby over there because obviously Israel uses this official apology for the French complicity to extract money and political advantage, just like they do it here in the United States of America. All right, let's talk a little bit about computers because there's a new ransomware making the rounds, and it's called resinware, and it hits your system and encrypts the documents. And here's the bizarre part. It doesn't demand a ransom. You have to play an anime game. And when you score high enough on the game, your system is unlocked. And apparently it is a very difficult game to do well in, especially for people who don't play computer games anyway, which I'm definitely one of those. But that's the new one. It's coming on out. Now, we've been talking about border checks, border security coming into this country, Trump's travel ban, and they're still trying to portray it as an anti-Muslim ban. And it really isn't. It's an access ban. And there's a story that came out from, RINF.com, basically saying that travelers coming to the United States from Britain, Germany, or France can be denied entry to the United States if they refuse to hand over the passwords to their electronic devices. Apparently, the British, French, and Germans are now considered an area of extreme sensitivity. And it is a very egregious violation of privacy. I think it's going to further destroy our tourist industry. People don't want to come here. They can't have a relaxing, fun time here. I used to have some friends who live in Great Britain, and they used to come out here to Hawaii once every single year. And then after the last time, they said, we're not going to do this again. We cannot have a relaxing vacation in a country that is treating everybody like they're a POW. Now, something you may want to be aware of as... station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 3. Now, if you're like me, you probably like to use Google Maps to find local businesses. And there are 2 problems with that. One is that when businesses go out of business, which is happening a lot, they are not removed from Google Maps, and you can waste a lot of time clicking on links and trying to get to the website, and then you find out that they're just not there anymore. But there's another one. Apparently, scammers who feel it is open season on you, the American public, are adding thousands of fake companies to Google Maps. So you'll be looking for something, you're looking at Google Maps for something nearby, and you'll click on the link, and it'll say, yes, we're in your neighborhood, give us a call. And the call goes to a call center for a company that basically has contractors, unaccredited contractors, that will do jobs for them at a huge markup. And you can wind up being coerced into paying much more than the original quoted price. There's no control on this. Google apparently is perfectly happy with this. Now, down in Australia, their consumer watchdog agency, the Competition and Consumer Commission, is filing a legal complaint on behalf of 275 consumers against Apple because they're refusing to repair devices that have been repaired by or serviced by a third party. In other words, if you have an Apple device and you go get something done to it by a third party, Apple says they refuse to serve it from then on. You're on your own. And it's just another way of guaranteeing cash flow to Apple. And Apple repairs are very expensive. Boy, remember the big stink over that first battery in the iPod? Battery would wear out quickly. What's the solution? Buy a new iPod. Now, Symantec is now attributing 40 cyber attacks to hacking tools leaked out of the CIA. And by the way, apparently another hacker group has dumped a huge treasure trove of NSA hacking tools onto the web, supposedly in response to Donald Trump violating his campaign promise regarding no more foreign interventions. And I agree with the protest, but not the method, because it's all going to make our lives just that much more miserable. The CIA and NSA, far from making us safer and more secure in our online world, have actually made us much more vulnerable. And that may be what's going on here, where TP-Link's M5350 3G Wi-Fi router has a major, huge bug in it. And the discoverer of the bug, Securi, basically said that there is code inside the router where if it receives a specially SMS message with a specific line of text, will reply to the text with the login credentials for the router. So even if you have put your own password and username on the router so that people can't use the default system, anybody who has this system can send a text message to your router, which is visible on the internet, and they will get back your login credentials from which they can then telnet in and do all kinds of mischief. Now, this article where it's being reported, the Register over in Great Britain, is saying, well, this was probably created for the convenience of the developers, but somehow it got left behind before the router was put out on the market, and it should have been deleted. I think this is one of the NSA's mandated backdoors, because we know they've been doing it all over the place, and they're leaving us wide open for cyber criminals. Isn't the first responsibility of any government to take care of its population, its infrastructure, safety and security? Not actively sabotage it. Now, we're going to go ahead and open the phone lines if anybody wants to call on in. There's another malware out there called BrickerBot, and it is bricking, which means rendering permanently useless Internet of Things devices. And it was detected by Radware, and apparently it's just running around. If you have any Internet of Things devices, of which I have a grand total of none, it just wrecks them. That's it. There's no ransom demanded. There's no stealing of data. There's nothing. It's just, we're going to wreck it just to see if we can wreck it. Now, this is a very alarming development. Story that we're getting out of Investment Watch blog. Apparently, Germany has just passed a new law arrogating to itself the authority to simply erase independent media websites from the Internet. And they do it simply by forcing social media sites to ban them. It's another reason for you to stop using the main social media companies that are co-opted by the government and go with the alternatives. Scene Life, VK, and so forth. Obviously, the designers of the New World Order have to be really, really afraid to be doing steps like that. This is Germany's updated version of book burning. And we're still getting the bovine excrement about a lot of things here. Story out of Sputnik News. Scientists are saying that the Fukushima radiation on the U.S. West Coast poses no health risk whatsoever. They've gone from denying that the Fukushima radiation got over to the United States, and they're saying, well, yes, it did, but it's like Ann Coulter said, a little radiation is actually good for you. So you had scientists from Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and from Ottawa's Fisheries and Oceans Canada are saying that the radioactive exposure from Fukushima is less than what you would get as a dental patient exposed to a routine X-ray. Now, there's one small issue to keep in mind. A dental X-ray lasts a second. Exposure to Fukushima radioactivity runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. And when you leave the dentist's office, you leave the radioactive source behind. Whereas if you're living along the west coast of the United States and you eat fish that are carrying the radiation, you are now permanently contaminated, and it will stay inside your body, radiating for however much longer you have to live. And already they're acknowledging thyroid cancer rates in the U.S. are climbing, although they insist they have absolutely no explanation for it whatsoever. Now, going on back, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, very tightly tied in with the U.S. government, and Ottawa's Fisheries and Oceans Canada. In other words, they're out there trying to protect their fishing industries. Because if word gets out that the fish are radioactive, people are not going to want to buy them. And again, I go back to that story about Deadliest Catch, about the crab fishermen. And they did their end-of-season show down here on Oahu, and there was a member of their crew who's a fan, and invited me over to just watch the filming. And when the cameras were not running, all they could talk about was how terrified they were that some college student was going to go down to the shoreline in Alaska, grab a crab, put a radiation meter up next to it, and post the video on YouTube. They were deathly afraid of that. Remember when Fukushima first happened? U.S. Department of the Interior and the Alaska Fisheries Commission both came on out and said, our fish are safe. We're not even going to test. We don't need to test. We know it's safe. Please go on buying our product. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And again, another reason to be very concerned about Donald Trump being co-opted, hijacked, going back on so many of his promises, and really just seeming to have an endless series of bad choices for his close associates. And apparently Trump's pick to oversee the pharmaceutical industry is very financially connected to the opioid industry, which we know is now out of control. Something like 80% of the world's opium output is consumed in the United States of America, both illegally and prescription. And the opium is hideously addictive. And apparently, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who's Trump's nominee to lead the Food and Drug Administration, has received significant payments from the opioid industry while attacking all attempts to slow down the overprescribing of opiate pills. Very, very disappointed. Now then, back to the world of your wonderful Obamacare, which is unfortunately still in effect due to the deadlock in Congress. And we're all required to have our Obamacare-compliant health insurance, which is very expensive, much more expensive than the plans that Obama said we could keep if we liked. And they have sky-high deductibles, which makes it very hard to actually get anything of any value from these policies. It's like a money motel. The money goes in, but it doesn't come out. And now it's getting worse, because the health insurance companies are starting to exclude certain medications from coverage. And basically, they're looking at 154 different drugs will now be exempt from insurance coverage. And if you're on one of these prescriptions, the copay is just going to burn you. Now, some of the drugs include Viagra, Qsymia, and apparently now they're starting to get into medications that aren't just for fun, but it's just another way of gouging the American people for health care. Best thing you can do is get off those pills. Eat healthy, watch your diet, watch your vitamins and supplements. Because you look at somebody who's on that prescription medicine medical treadmill, those are some of the sickest looking people I've ever seen. They don't even look healthy. Another story coming on out here, this is in the Huffington Post. Childhood antibiotic use could lead to autoimmune disease in adulthood. And antibiotics are something that when they were first discovered, it was wonderful, and then they just became the one-size-fits-all. Whatever you've got, here's some antibiotics. And unfortunately, the antibiotics are not very selective. Yes, they will kill the specific germ that you are dealing with in the illness, but along the way, they kill other bacteria that your body needs. So antibiotics can actually cause serious damage because they indiscriminately kill off hundreds of important strains of healthy bacteria that you need to stay healthy, along with the bad bacteria. And now a Monash University study involving mice, published in the April issue of the Journal of Leukocyte Biology, finds that childhood antibiotic use impedes the normal growth and development of gut bacteria, which in turn affects the function of the immune system. 70% of your immune system is contained in the gut because your primary exposure to germs is via the food that you eat. Now, this story affects me for a personal reason, but I'll get into it. This is coming out of Sputnik News. There's been a study on the U.S. medical establishment that shows that sick Americans are being misdiagnosed at an absolutely frightening rate. And the gist of the story is that you should get a second opinion before you make any decisions. Don't get scared into committing to a source of treatment unless you really know. Remember that doctor who was sent to prison for telling perfectly healthy people they had cancer in order to sell chemotherapy and radiation treatments. And apparently 88% of patients who go get a second opinion from another doctor get a differing diagnosis. 88%. And we know there's a big problem with doctors being incentivized by various pharmaceutical companies to sell their product over others, and that's going to impose a bias on them. When I had my illness a few years ago, the reason it was so severe, the reason I almost died, was they misdiagnosed me twice in a row before they finally figured out what was going on. If they'd gotten the diagnosis right the first time, I probably would have not had to go to the hospital, because we just had a friend of ours who came down with the same thing I did, but they nailed it on that first diagnosis, and he's fine. Now then, down in New Zealand, the Maori Party is claiming a genetic engineering or GMO victory in the RMA reforms. And apparently the government was moving to strike out GMO-free areas set up by the Maori councils. And this was an agreement between the National and the Maori Party, where the Maoris don't want GMO. And so they have basically staked out areas and saying, no GMO allowed here. And the New Zealand government, as beholding to Monsanto apparently as our own, went on in and said, we can erase that. You are not allowed to have GMO-free land around your homes. And apparently it went to court, and apparently the court said, it's the Maoris' land, they can do whatever they want with it, including saying that they do not want certain types of products on it. And that, too, is another symptom of fascism, where the government comes on in and says that you must have something on your land or must have something in your body, or you're not allowed to eat this, you're not allowed to have that. We will decide everything for you. And usually there's a profit motive behind it, and that, again, gets us back to fascism. Now, over in North Carolina, another example of fascism at work, there's a bill moving through the North Carolina General Assembly that would bar North Carolinians living near the various factory farms from recovering more than token damages in civil lawsuits where the farm's corporate owner is found responsible for causing harm to them outside. Overuse of fertilizers, GMO. Basically, the North Carolina lawmakers are indemnifying the factory farms, saying, yeah, they feel really bad that they dumped a lot of raw sewage from their animals on your property, but you can't sue them. You know, you can only get a token award and a very, very nice apology on very expensive stationery. Apparently, a 3,700-year-old pyramid has been uncovered in Egypt. And apparently this pyramid is so old that it was actually buried. They say it goes back to the 13th dynasty, and they're saying it looks like this thing may be intact. This could be the biggest discovery since Tutankhamun. Now, they're beginning to realize that throughout history, the tomb robbers have always gone for the tombs of the pharaohs and their queens, because obviously there's a lot more material in there. And they're discovering now that the tombs of the mid-level nobility were basically bypassed. They weren't worth the tomb robbers' trouble to locate and dig into, and they're starting to find more and more of those are still intact with all of those archaeological treasures. Now, there's a lot of archaeology going on in Egypt that's being done through satellite observation. And there's a program called the Human Computing Initiative, where basically amateur scientists from around the world sign on to this thing, and you will be sent images, either from Egypt, or I was watching a show last night where they were searching for Genghis Khan's tomb, which has never been found. And these armchair scientists will look at these images, and they'll highlight something that looks interesting and send them all back. And they assemble the data, and they're actually being led to new archaeological discoveries. So that's a very, very exciting thing to do. If I had more spare time, I'd sign on for that thing myself. I remember some years ago, I was actually involved in one of the first attempts to use computerized image enhancement in an archaeological context. And it was for the J. Paul Getty Museum. And we got to work with some of the Roman artifacts to scan them and bring out the very faded painted illustrations that were on them. That was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun to do that. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently in the latest bit of distraction, Fox News is going on and on about United Airlines bumping passengers for this or that reason. And again, I think it's a recognition that this nonsensical story about Assad gassing his own people has fallen flat on its face. And now the rush is on to get something else going, tack on North Korea, United Airlines, Kim Kardashian, whatever is going to be here. Couple of interesting stories, then we're going to take some phone calls. Breakaway Catholic order hides priests accused of sexual crimes in British coastal town. And apparently they're saying this is a renegade Catholic bishop who's already been excommunicated twice, is basically harboring accused clergy so that they cannot be found by the police. And just to show that we don't really have a bias on this, there was a story that came through today. Apparently a Buddhist monk in Myanmar was arrested with a huge stash of methamphetamine pills. And they went back to the monastery, and they just found something like 4 million pills in there. So, boy, oh boy. All right, let's take some phone calls. Nicholas in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Just want to say thank you for having the show and telling us the truth. Just a quick story about myself. In 1991, I was in college, and we actually ordered pizza and beer and watched the bombing on TV of Iraq back then.
Yeah.
I bought it hook, line, and sinker. Hook, line, and sinker. I found your site shortly after 9/11, and I just awoke at that time. And I wanted to know what caused your awakening. What led you to the connection between the banks and the wars and the fraud? When did that start for you?
Boy, it's been a long process of evolution, and as I said, my skepticism of the media and the government began all the way back during Jim Garrison's trial of Clay Shaw, because I had saved all the magazines that came out from the Kennedy assassination, and I'd flipped through them, and I didn't see anything at all. And then when Garrison had Shaw up there and said, you know, there were things wrong with the story, and I went back and I looked with fresh eyes, and it all leapt out. The lies, the fake photos, and all the rest of that. And that, I think, sort of put me in a mental frame of mind to never trust what I was being told on TV ever again. Then, of course, the next step, which really did change my life, unfortunately, was I was working in Southern California, and I just had this this image that was put out by the White House of the hand of Vince Foster, supposedly with the gun he killed himself with. Now, at that time, my business was motion picture and television visual effects. It was my job to know what looks real and does not look real on film or TV. And the instant I looked at that picture, I said, this is a fake. It's a stage shot. It's not real.
Right.
There were so many problems with it. I mean, there was no blood at all on Foster's hand or white sleeve that he supposedly fired the gun with. And at that time, I was doing a little bit of work for a company that shared the same building as CNN Hollywood. And during lunch, we all shared the same outdoor cafe, and I was sharing this picture with some of the coworkers and saying, there's obviously a problem here. And I remember clearly seeing the people from CNN just listening intently to me. That very night, the threatening phone call started, and I was let go mid-production from this job the next day, and that was it. My career in Hollywood was over. And that was when I really woke up to the true nature of what life in the United States is like. We don't have freedom of speech. We don't have a system of justice that follows the law. We have the rich and powerful take what they want. And after that, it was just kind of a continuing process. I didn't have my career anymore, so I had a lot of time to focus on building the website and doing a lot of research. And, eventually building up this vast amount of information on the real history of the United States going back for the last 23 years.
Once you start looking at it, I mean, it really pops out at you. I mean,
I'm
trying to get as many people on your site as possible.
Yeah.
You know?
Once you stop believing.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah,
Yep.
once you stop believing,
Thank you. Yep.
once you stop believing and look at what's going on objectively, you see the lies very quickly. That's why they raise you to believe. Believe in Santa Claus, you're going to get a bicycle. Believe in the Easter Bunny, you get chocolate. Believe in honest government and honest bankers and truthful media, and you will not get harmed. We have to take a break for commercials. We've got another caller waiting on the line when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to take a phone call from Wes in Idaho. Aloha, Wes. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. You would, I'm sure, be knowledgeable about this one. How much do I have to pay for a Geiger counter? I see here on eBay they're $150 from the Russian Federation. I don't know what I'm looking at. China.
Well, basically how much you're paying for the detector is determined by a couple of factors, and perhaps the single most important one is whether it will measure alpha radiation, which is the lowest energy radiation, and in order to be able to do that, it requires a special window in the end of either the scintillometer or the Geiger-Müller tube. And that's what really drives the cost up, because the most popular substance for that window is the mineral mica that alpha rays can pass through. Alpha radiation is very weak. It's stopped by the dead skin cells on your skin. It can't get into your body unless you actually eat the alpha emitter, and that's another major problem. The lower cost radiation meters measure beta rays and gamma rays, and that's basically the primary issue, and some are made for just occasional use, and others are very heavy-duty, high-end search tools, and they can be very expensive, $600 and $700. And I have two radiation meters, including this GMC 300E Plus, which has the advantage of being able to plug into the USB port, and with the associated software, actually keep track of records of radiation. And actually, at the moment, the radioactivity here on Oahu is pretty much at the normal baseline level for living on top of a big slab of congealed basalt.
Really? You know, do you eat fish at all, or?
Not too much, and unfortunately, I don't have an alpha detector. And again, in the case of alpha, you have to go through a long, involved process to make sure that there's nothing in the way of the particles. Because if you have an alpha emitter inside the fish, obviously the tissues of the fish are going to prevent that particle from coming on out. So actually doing an alpha search on food is a very, very difficult thing to do. But unfortunately, alpha is one of the greatest areas of risk involved. But on top of Fukushima and Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and Hanford and WIP and all the rest of it, the fact that we could be in an all-out nuclear war should be of concern to us all because of the long-term effects of radiation exposure. And one of the big things that was hushed up following the attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was how many of those poor people who did not die immediately of radiation sickness and flash burn injuries went on to have horrible cancers and leukemias. There was a scandal during America's development of nuclear weapons where one of the Nevada tests, they wanted to simulate using a nuclear weapon to breach an enemy's lines and then see how quickly U.S. forces could exploit that breach and rush on through to the rear areas in order to disrupt the enemy line. And the only protection these soldiers were given were sunglasses, and they all came down with cancers and leukemias after it. It really is a very, very nasty thing. A lot of the people who were living on the South Pacific Islands where the testing was going on came down with radiation-linked diseases. One of the worst disasters to hit involved a nuclear test that actually produced an explosion almost 3 times what the scientists thought it was going to be. And there was a huge cloud of radioactive fallout that caught a Japanese fishing ship. And on the way back to Japan, the crew started coming down ill, but the United States did not communicate to Japan exactly what had happened. And so the cargo of fish was sold onto the markets there, and the Japanese people who ate the fish all started coming down with cancers and leukemias. So radiation is kind of like the gift that keeps on giving, whether it's plutonium, uranium, depleted uranium, or any of that. There have been horrendous, horrendous disasters with this stuff.
is zeolite or calcium bentonite clay or anything effective on that? Or?
Well, it depends on whether you're merely exposed or contaminated, because exposure to radiation comes and goes, like an X-ray. If you're contaminated, it's almost impossible to locate and remove the particles. You can try chelation, but there's no guarantees. It all depends on where it is. If you inhale it and it's in your lung tissue, it's going to be impossible to find and impossible to remove, at least with current technology.
Life on Earth.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, I bet. Vaccination, what's the update on Kennedy? Is there one?
Well, I mean, Kennedy's been out there making some public appearances. He's getting zero coverage from the corporate media. We all know why that is. Unfortunately, the way Trump appears to be bailing on his campaign promises, I'm not optimistic that we're going to see anything come out of the Vaccine Safety Commission or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because apparently Trump has been threatened or blackmailed, or somehow he's been bought and just turned into another instrument of our fascist economic dictatorship. And nobody is allowed to say anything bad about any product that's making money, because making money is the only measure of morality left in the United States of America. If it makes money, it's good. If it doesn't make money, it's bad.
Yeah, I sent a letter to the editor for a publication here in North Idaho, brought up what Robert Kennedy was doing, offering $100,000, and they wanted to come up with a scientific study. As a couple of years ago, they actually printed a letter I sent in, and there was a lot of people, a number of people from Kootenai Panhandle Health professionals saying, "Oh no, that Wes, he doesn't know what he's talking about." I called up Panhandle Health and said, I want to tell you, I want to warn you about a public health threat. What is that, sir? Vaccination.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think the reason that Trump may have been sympathetic to this issue is because Barron seems to show the symptoms of being vaccine damaged. And it is a major crisis because at the rate that autism is occurring in our population, by 2030, half of every generation, half of all children will be diagnosed with something along the autism spectrum. And that means these people, by and large, are going to be unavailable to the workforce, plus a significant portion of the healthy workforce is going to be tied up taking care of these people. And there will be insufficient workers left over to take care of things like repairing the roads and building the bridges and certainly manufacturing whatever it is we're going to be manufacturing to sell to the rest of the world. So unless this autism epidemic is dealt with honestly and fairly, it may be profitable in the short run to go on forcing people to buy vaccines that are causing autism, but in the long run, it is a threat to the economy of the United States as a whole. Maybe they understand it's not going to last till 2030 anyway, and maybe that's why they don't really care. But it does show a lack of long-term thinking in virtually every policy-making apparatus of the U.S. government right now.
Ivanka Trump, we know that marriages have been arranged for political reasons, keeping it all in the family, so that sort of thing. That might be what we're witnessing right here. And also, I appreciate your comments on this, but I don't believe that Jewish people are really going to accept Ivanka Trump as a Jew. She did a conversion. Isn't there a law that you have to have a mother Jewish to really be considered Jewish?
Well, I mean, I think the fact that Donald Trump's father seemed to be Jewish in the religious sense. You know, I mean, the rules are kind of fast and loose. When I was married to my first wife, who was Jewish, and she basically said, because it is a matriarchal society, I was already by default Jewish the instant I married her. And I said, that's all fine. Just don't get anywhere near my private parts with that knife. But you know, we observed the rituals and stuff. We had seders, and I still insisted on a Christmas tree. She'd call it a Hanukkah bush, but we did have a little six-pointed star on the top of it, and the various other religious symbols. So I'm willing to go with the flow on these things. I think somebody that is as influential as Ivanka is going to be seen as very attractive, and therefore they will simply go along and say, oh, yes, she's Jewish. We don't need to complain about that. But I'll tell you, with this nonsense where Ivanka's emotional reaction to the dead children being the deciding factor for her father, President Trump, that is a very bizarre story because it paints a picture of an Ivanka Trump who allows her emotions to take control. She doesn't think about things. I mean, anybody who thinks about that Assad gassed his own people's story understands it is implausible. It is impossible. It just doesn't make any sense. And then for President Trump to be making foreign policy decisions based on this little crying girl, that's not a very positive image of the presidency that they're putting out with that story.
I see on YouTube the video that I was trying to point out a while back. It's called Why Women Destroys Civilizations. There's now 1 million views, and it's 50,000 people have voted on it, and it's got 82% approval rating. So obviously there's a lot of women that recognize that their emotions really guide them into problem situations. That's what you're just pointing out to me right now about Ivanka, that her emotions do drive her decisions quite a bit, especially when they're younger. I know that there are some older women I like, Evie Kidd in particular, but that film, you need to maybe watch it and a comment on it. Once again, 82% approval rating. 1 million people have watched it. 50,000 people have voted on it. And it's a hard study. There has not
Well,
been...
hang on. First of all, that video was actually a response to another one about how women have built civilization. And that one was just a flat-out pander to feminist liberalism, and the video you're talking about was a response. The reality is, I mean, there's always a continuum in people's heads between emotionality and rationality. Like I said, our culture encourages people to be emotional and to let their beliefs control them, because those who can manipulate the beliefs now have a tool to manipulate the population. People who are thinking calmly and rationally and analyzing facts for themselves are very, very hard to control. And that's why our entire culture is all about teaching young people not to think, but to believe. Believe in Santa Claus, you get a bicycle. Believe in the Easter Bunny, you get chocolate eggs. Believe in the Tooth Fairy, you get a nickel. Just believe. Believe your government is good and all the other governments are bad. Believe that the corporate media is always telling you the truth. Believe that the bankers are honest people. We are enslaved by our beliefs. And I think the very best thing that could happen to the human race is we evolve to the point where beliefs are no longer part of our makeup.
That 1599 Geneva Bible very much built the USA. I mean, one thing that needs to be taught is that man is a very sinful creature. You don't want to trust him, and your rights come from God. That is one of the most important things to understanding the government of the United States, and that's what really separated us from all other civilizations where kings had such control over people, and we came from a country where the English people bowed down to their king until it got to be to the point where we wrote a Declaration of Independence and said no more of this. We're not going to have a king.
Wes, we're going to have to let you go because we're coming up on a commercial break here. And I do want to cover a few more things before the end of the show, and I've let you go on for quite a long time here. The primary cause of the American Revolution was not having to bow to the king, because King George III never actually made it over to the colonies, and so nobody was bowing to anybody. But it was King George III's currency declaration that all business in the colonies had to be conducted using banknotes borrowed at interest from the Bank of England, the private central bank of its day, and it impoverished and enslaved the American people until finally they said, we've had enough of this. And then back in 1913, when the Federal Reserve was created, the new private central bank, public schools stopped teaching about King George III's Currency Act, and they recast the American Revolution as tea dropped in Boston Harbor and various other things like that to sort of prevent the smart kids in the class from standing up and saying, wait a minute, we're back in that same situation all over again. Because that's exactly what happened in 1913. A corrupt Congress and a corrupt president sold the American people back into the slavery of the same banking system we fought that revolution to break free of. And the bankers understand we're starting to wake up to what's really going on, and that's why they're trying to slam the slave cage shut with this push against cash. All right, moving on here, I'm seeing this video where apparently Putin is coming out and he's decided to abandon diplomacy, and he simply declared this claim that Assad gassed his own people is a total lie. Actually, he used stronger language than that, but that's what he's saying. We're past the time of mincing words. This was another U.S. war of conquest, started with another U.S. government lie, aided and abetted by the U.S. corporate media. And that's all it is. And if Ivanka Trump and Donald Trump actually believe this, then they are, in fact, idiots. And they've made the world far more dangerous. Now, the fact that we're not falling for that Assad gassed his own people hoax this time may be why they're trying to accelerate the invasion of North Korea. Give us another distraction. And they may get that going with another false flag. Drop an atom bomb someplace in the area and say, oh, that was North Korea. The war is on. But if there's one thing the U.S. bombed in Syria last week, it's their own credibility and trustworthiness. Nobody is going to believe anything the U.S. government and corporate media says from now on. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program today here, and I'm looking at this video over at InfoWars where Roger Stone is predicting that a congressional whistleblower is about to come forward with something about John McCain. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Let's take a phone call. Chris in Clearwater, Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Fukushima and the radiation problem, and I would like to find if I'm incorrect here because I've done a little bit of online research and found when I do a search of lasers, radioactive waste decay, that lasers can be used to dramatically speed up the decay of radioactive waste, and the only obstacle of which I've heard is that someone once said that, well, lasers are a narrow beam. Well, I know that they can be designed to sweep widely, disperse widely. So I've done a search and found U.S. patent 6724189, B as in boy, number 2, filed December 18, 2008.
Okay, we're running out of time here. Just cut to the gist of it because I am failing to see how specifically laser light is going to clean up radioactive waste because the light interaction with the atom is happening at the valence level in the electron shells, and the radioactive decay is happening in the nucleus. And maybe just generally heating the radioactive waste will get it to release its radioactivity more rapidly and get down to lower levels. But I don't know of any way that the total amount of radioactive energy coming out of a particular material can be reduced. All it can be is buried. And so I would be very, very cautious about going down this line because you can get monochromatic light without needing a laser to do it. But again, the laser is going to interact with the atom at the electron shell level, not the nucleus. Okay?
Well, I'm not sure how it works. I've done a search also with the addition of the word water to the search term lasers, radioactive waste decay, and came up with an interesting article, Unlikely Solution Potentially Discovered to Clean Up Nuclear Waste. It says that a research group from the Prokhorov General Physics Institute says that they have discovered a method for turning radioactive substances into neutral and safe ones in as little as an hour. So they're saying that radioactive isotopes with half-lives of millions of years can be neutralized in an hour or less.
Well, can you send me that article? Can you send me that article? I'd like to read it. I don't understand how that can be working. And we do know there's a lot of false science out there, being politicized and so forth, like human-caused global warming. All right, Chris, we're going to let you go here because we're just about out of time here. And I'm going to be leaving shortly to go do my weekly interview on the Jim Goddard Show up there in Vancouver. Again, we're looking at this story. We're going to keep an eye on this. Roger Stone is saying that there's about to be a big scandal uncorked on John McCain. I think probably most of you would agree with me. It would be something pleasant to see. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. We'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, please share everything you learn here with everyone that you know. As that caller said, for some reason, we are back in that place of being at risk of a nuclear world war. I'd like to kind of call it off. I hope you will help. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.